Now, by the way, for the countdown clock, you don't have to worry about it right now, but we play a little game, and it's called Starting to the Atomic Time on the stream, not internally. So what you have to do that is you have to figure out what the nominal offset is in the stream, and then you offset when you start the countdown clock to that. So anyway, just letting you know I'll challenge you to figure that out, and it's very rewarding when you hit it right on.
And do we want to use the sting today or not, Alex?
You can use this thing now that I know it's coming. It's fine.
Okay, copy that.
I got my background back, as you can see.
You're significantly less sprinkled.
Yes.
Digging the ice blue background there.
I don't have the diffuser on it, but it looks kind of nice. It's kind of fun. It's a little out there. I don't know exactly how I got there.
Me and David Brady has been trying to push the ice blue look. Welcome to the club.
There we go. Ice blue. It's gold. So cool. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Office Hours. If you are watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. First hour is general discussion of every day, 7 days a week about media and virtual production. Second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. Today, we have my old friends and good friends, Geoffrey Orthwein and Andrew Sullivan on. They're working on a movie, and they're going to shoot it in a couple weeks. It's called I Don't Want Blood. And so, and they're going to talk a little bit about the pre-production and what they're doing to get ready and how they prep all of that. So it should be a really good second hour. Tomorrow, of course, we have education from 8 to 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And then at 11, John Snyder is going to come on and he's going to talk about avoiding death by PowerPoint. How do we make our presentations a little bit better? And then, of course, Sunday is our philosophical Sunday where we ask questions about office hours and media and everything else. But if you put the technical questions there, just remember that we don't record them. So you better be there. So you got to pay attention to that. But at 9 o'clock, Nick Jeshishin from Drexel University is going to be showing us how to get characters out of MetaHuman into Unreal Engine. And the reason we're doing that is because we have the Office Hours space program, and there's a big control room. There's room for all of you. so you get to jump in there. So that'll be a kind of a little project if you like to. The emails that go out every morning will tell you exactly how to get started so that you can hit the ground running on Sunday morning if you choose to. All right, let's jump into the questions and we'll throw it to Josh Minden. Is that right? Did I get that right?
No, I don't think so. I think, Alex, I'm doing the standard one this morning, unless I missed something.
Reader. Nope, it's Bill. I mistook. Question manager is very confusing for me, so we should not have that in there. All right, go ahead.
Douglas Carmichael is our first question this morning. Says, I know Alex has mentioned the Nokia Ozo, but what camera would be best for 360-degree concert videos like this one? And he has a link there to something.
Yeah, I did look at the link because the question was asked early. We always like to remind people of that. We thought about that a lot. I did a lot of 360 work a couple of years ago, and we did do a couple where we put the band all the way around it. Here's the problem with that: is that's not how you see it in the bar. Like when you go to the bar, you don't have the band like wrapping around you, and we found it to be very a little bit problematic. You know, really what you want is the experience of I'm sitting there right in front of the band and I'm there watching the band, you know, and I feel like I'm there. So it's not so much the camera, and there's lots of different cameras, but it's more of where you put the person. So you want the band to be somewhere between 5 and 15 feet, maybe 20 feet away from you. That's where the resolution that we have in most of these cameras is the most effective. And also if you're up stereo where you're going to see a lot of 3D of people going out, once they get further away, it doesn't matter as much. And once they're closer, the stitching becomes problematic. It doesn't really work as well. So that's kind of the problem we have with 360 there. What most people are doing is going to stereo 180 or 180. And the new R5, the new Canon R5 is what most of my friends that are doing this are talking about. It's a dual lens, goes onto one sensor, one full frame sensor. It looks pretty impressive. I haven't gotten to watch one yet, but basically it does 180. That's the part that you really want to see the band, and it doesn't put all of your all the people that in the audience, on call that they're now on air. We had some issues where we put it in front of a big stage, in front of thousands of people, and the people in the front, they weren't as conscious that they were being broadcasted as they probably should have been. So 360 is not necessarily good for the audience either. So it's less, Insta360 makes some great ones. There's a lot of Zcam has some ones that you can kind of stitch together. There's a bunch of different companies that make good stereo cameras. Even the Thetas, produce some really good footage, but it's more of where you put the camera and how you use it. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Douglas Carmichael. He says, while cleaning out my mom's bedroom, I found an old Radio Shack Optimus cassette deck. In this digital age, does anyone still manufacture cleaning tapes and other maintenance materials for said decks?
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
So let's talk about head cleaning and things like that. This is actually a pretty simple thing. Yes, you can still get them on eBay and stuff like that. And there's two different ways to clean heads, dry ways and wet ways. The wet ways, unless there's some bottle of the cleaning fluid, if you're buying something off of eBay, it'll probably be desiccated and dry and be gone. So I wouldn't use that. The dry cassettes still do work for cleaning those heads, but it's super easy to clean audio heads with just using some denatured alcohol and a Q-tip. There's nothing magic about it. And unlike video cassette players where there's a spinning helical head that sticks out, and if you try to do it yourself, you can really damage it, there's nothing in the head stack of an audio cassette deck that you can damage. So you can be pretty aggressive by going in there using denatured alcohol and a Q-tip to just clean not only the heads, but the tape path, so the capstans and the pinch rollers to get all that gunk off of there.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Bill pretty much covered it, but I thought this was pretty funny. If you want to stick to Radio Shack, you can actually pick up an old Radio Shack head cleaner still. Yeah. And so
there you go. Go ahead, Kenneth.
Yeah, dry head cleaners are like sandpaper. I'm all in favor of alcohol and a Q-tip. Radio Shack was a mass marketer, and so they will sell anything, would sell anything to anybody who wanted to buy it. The second time you go to get head cleaner, you will have red alcohol on the back of the bottle, and then you'll know.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
You're a good son for cleaning out your mom's bedroom. I agree with Kenneth. The cassettes that claim to be cleaners, some are okay, most of them are bad. And if you do some fast forwarding and monitoring, you're going to be grinding your heads down.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, everyone's covered the cleaning the heads pretty much. Another thing you might want to do is clean the pinch roller and the capstan. If you can see it in there, put it in the play mode and stick that Q-tip with the isopropyl alcohol down there to clean off the resident gunk that builds up around the capstan and the pinch roller, because that can create problems too, and the pinch roller can dry out. So that can be another issue.
So much technical skill that we'll probably never use again. All right, next question.
Moving on, Douglas Carmichael's right back again. Within an article about a proposed fiber optic link to McMurdo Station in Antarctica, one of the use cases was improved video streaming for education and outreach. As a production professional, how would you bill for an Antarctic event?
Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, well, given that I'm in South Australia, I think I'm the closest to be able to talk on the panel. I'm the closest to Antarctica. So it's an interesting thing. Yeah, it's a little cold. There's a couple of really interesting things about this. One is that a regular on office hours, Vienna, is a medical doctor and is very interested in space. And something that's interesting about what happens in Australia is that they do lots of the ships and things that go down to Antarctica, and there are space programs that do training on those boats. And so, because it's very similar to similar sort of environments and things, and the way that they do their medicine. So anyway, that's one thing. The next thing is that this is the proposed line going off of New Zealand down to potentially 1,000 people, up to 1,000 people that are at that station at any one time. And so what I found fascinating is that we love to think that we are connecting to every continent in the world. And so this would make that easier. But here's what's fascinating in a Verge article that I read about this. It said another important conversation is how it would change the way that the community functions. Antarctica research stations are tight-knit communities because of their isolation. Full connectivity could change a lot, including how researchers interact with each other and how they focus on their field work versus events back at home. Isn't that, it's like, this is the internet. This is like, oh, we don't want to bring fast internet, because then they'll connect with their people at home and they'll be more connected to the world and they won't do their work. Fascinating stuff.
There'll be a lot more on Facebook and Twitter and everything else. But just imagine it. We've done some events where we brought people in from Antarctica, and up until now it has been satellite. And the satellite. The problem really is the geostationary satellites. The angle of incidence from the Antarctica is just grazes along the atmosphere, and it makes it very hard to get a good bandwidth. But the most we've ever gotten out of there is about a meg. Up, and that's like not good. So anyway, I'm excited about it. It depends. The cost of it will literally be just how much they're charging for transport. If a government's funding it, and then they're just saying, and then it's just maintenance or whatever. The problem really is amortizing that much fiber to 1,000 people is expensive. So hopefully if someone else is paying for it and it's relatively inexpensive, connecting them would cost almost. It'll be no different than connecting somebody from, a far off distant land like Australia. Go ahead, Chris.
Grant, what you're talking about there reminds me, it's sort of the beginning of, high-speed internet. A friend of mine at his business, he was actually working for his father, and he was like, I don't want to put the internet on everybody's computer. It's like putting a TV on their desk. They're not going to get any work done. He was totally right, by the way.
Yeah. Exactly. Next question.
Next question comes from Craig McFarlane again from Boston. I have had an intense power outage that flickered a lot, very stressful. Recommendations for a home office uninterruptible power supply. My typical load is 2 computers and 3 to 4 monitors.
Go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, about 2,000 volt amps will probably get you there. I use APC. I'm an APC user from way back, so I put a link in for them.
Go ahead, Courtney.
I would use a little different tactic. I use APC, but what I would do, I'd get 2 of them, 2 of the 500s, and put each computer on a separate one. That way, if one decides to go south, the power supply, it doesn't take down the other one. And plug the monitors into the surge protection, or you can plug one into the battery backup section. Those APCs have 2 rows of plugs, one for surge protection and one for surge protection plus battery backup. So plug the computers into the battery backup and your primary monitor into the battery backup, and of course your modem, cable modem or router, so that you still have an internet connection. And then you can plug your secondary monitors just into surge protection. That way, if you lose power completely, you'll still be able to shut things down or keep an eye on things at least for 20 to 30 minutes or so. And I put each computer on a separate UPS.
Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, I totally agree with Courtney about having multiple. I have 3 UPSs, and there's one you can see over my shoulder. There's a green, there's a circuit board that's not working at the moment, but it's fine. I've got my other 2 that are running. You can buy cheaper ones, and that might be okay. I just wouldn't go to something that hasn't got any screen on it, any monitoring on it. You really want to know, the voltage coming in, the voltage going out, and you want to also know your battery, how much battery time you have on it, and all of that is very handy to have that screen.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, ditto what Grant said. APC Smart UPS will have the LED screen on there to give you the power consumption and the load.
Yeah, I have in this office, I have 3 of the APC 1500s. And the 1500s are, for me, that's the break point of the pricing. So at 1500 VA here, at least, they're the right cost. They have removable batteries. They have the 2 rows. They have the screen on the front. So all the things that are required. And I think at one point, my former company, Pixelcore, probably had maybe 100 of them. they would go out in different kits, and they work really well. We do have to surgically remove the beepers if you want to use them as actual batteries on set, just in case you're wondering. But it can be done. Next question.
Next one comes from Paul Buchan in Columbus, Ohio, and he says, curious to hear what tools people are using to bring in remote contributors to in-person and or hybrid events, for example, Zoom or vMix call, but more focused toward live events.
Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, so we did an event a few weeks ago. First time we'd done a physical event for all our team. One of the key speakers in the end didn't make it. And what we did was use Teams, and you can do the same thing with Ecamm with interviewer mode on a laptop to try and bring it in. I have to tell you, this was an event where the technicians that were provided by the hotel had actually not done an event for 2 years, had never been in the room. And it took a lot of practice. And at one point they said, I don't think this is possible. I said, well, fortunately for you, you have a room of 80 audio video engineers here. I'm sure we can make it work, but it was not easy.
Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, a few years ago, I did an event like this. We had a speaker come in, and I used Teams and I used NDI, and I thought it was pretty good. That was before I was using Zoom, and so now I just totally do it all in Zoom. You could do it on a PC with the second output. You can get a clean feed of an active speaker or pinning someone, or go further and go to Zoom ISO and have a bunch of separate outputs coming into a production switcher and doing it that way. But since the interesting thing about the Teams, when we had the product manager on from Teams, I started thinking about it. I was like, oh, gee, there's some great features in that. And then I had a meeting on Teams this week, and it was just a dumpster fire. I was like, I couldn't wait to get back into Zoom.
There you go. Go ahead, John.
Couple considerations, Paul. Thank you for the question. I've tried every remote, contribution tool that's out there, and the thing about Zoom is they're spending $1 billion of infrastructure worldwide, and so it's super reliable, and that's a huge consideration. And it's easy, and people probably know how to use it already, and that's another big consideration.
Yeah, go ahead, Geoffrey.
And I've done the Batman phone thing where I have one Zoom on one and I have one Zoom on the other, and then I just kind of cross the receivers so that person can go on. But still, my favorite thing is to pre-record the whole session and then pump it in that way. That way the actual people can be in the room with everybody else, answering questions, talking to them as the presentation's going. Yeah,
I will say that the one that we're experimenting with that we haven't really used in an event, but we're playing with, is Stream Voodoo, because the quality of the video is really high. We have a lot of control over bandwidth and VP8 or VP9 or AV1, and you can you have a lot of settings and a lot of controls from it. And so we're really interested in that one. I'm still working on validating it for it. Outside of that, I think Zoom's the only other option because everybody knows how to use it. The quality of the video is significantly higher than the other options other than Stream Voodoo. So the bit rate is higher, the quality of the video, the stability of the video, all of those things are better. The only thing that we then switch up to if we really, depends on how big your event is. But when we go past Zoom, we use things like the switch. So LTN and the switch are kind of commercial grade connections. These are private fiber lines between where the person is. They might be at an insert studio and the location. The switch will have about, instead of doing 6 megs a second like Zoom, it'll do up to 1.5 gigs per second, and its latency is about less than half of Zoom. So it's a really great connection, but it's very expensive. Next question.
Next one comes from Graham Cardwell in Belfast, Northern Ireland. He says, has the panel any experience of or recommendations for single operator end zone or sideline cameras on portable masts for field sports? And he notes off camera audio input from a radio mic is a must have.
Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, I've had some experience in this and been a part of teams that have done it. And we've tried a few different variations. We settled on Panasonic PTZ cameras that had really good controllers. It was really about the being able to control really well on the joystick. and some of those PTZs have gotten better now. And we put them on, sometimes we put them on scissor lifts. This would be for Aussie rules football, where we're trying to get right at the end, right up high over those large goals, and shooting down. And so on those scissor lifts, though, they wobble around in the wind. And so what we settled on is masts, telescopic masts that we would put up, and then we'd have a bunch of guy ropes that we would tie it right down. We'd tie it to some cars and tie it to the fence and to a few different places, and it would get pretty good. It was pretty solid then.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I had a friend who bought one of those mast cams and was using it for local sports. And so it's a single point of view, which I think is really good for things like post-game review and coaching, not particularly good for feeding to an audience because all the players will be relatively small from a high down angle, particularly in the large field sports, football and soccer. So I think a little bit better if you're doing something like basketball where you can get a little bit closer and not have to raise so high. But, you know, in most participatory sports, if you're doing this for the idea of sending it to people, I would rather see the faces of the player. And I think most of the people who are watching maybe in the post would be more interested in seeing the players than just the top of their heads. So I'm not sure it's the best single camera thing.
I don't think I think it's just a single operator. I think this is just one camera probably out of 10 or 20.
Yeah.
It's just where.
Oh, if it's one of many, then it's
just
an option.
Get you that angle.
That's great.
Yeah, go ahead. Paul, real quick.
Yeah, there's a guy who works at a small Oregon college who hangs out almost all day in office hour, and that's what he does. He builds his stuff all day long. And if you want to learn from the master, that's who you need to connect with.
Yeah. Next question.
Zach Marley in Denton, Texas is up next. He says, I've seen Guy with some Triad-Orbit gear. Does anyone use that gear at home or in production?
I have a couple Triad. Excuse me. I have a couple Triad-Orbit tripods. They're amazing. They're basically, they have a low output of the tripod, so in a long pole. And we bought a bunch of them for our Ozos, actually, for the 360 that we talked about a little earlier. And they work really, really well. Yeah, we like them a lot. They're really heavy. So you just have to know that they have a lot of low weight. And the only one I've used is their tripods. But for the reason that the low open is important is because we have to paint the bottom out but I use the camera I have right here is on a Triad-Orbit. And the reason I use it there is because it takes almost no space between me and the wall. Because it's just a little tripod at the bottom and it goes straight up and it'll hold a teleprompter. Yeah. Next question.
Next question comes to us from Michael Forrest in London in the UK. He says, I have noticed that nobody really wears big headphones on office hours. Do people consider this a worthwhile aesthetic trade-off?
Go ahead, Chris.
I've spent most of my career wearing headphones. And at the beginning of the pandemic, I was doing a call and somebody said, oh, you got those Princess Leia things on your head. And I'd never even heard that before. I know that Alex really pushes, he talks a lot about what is it, Alex? Cognitive load. Yeah. Anything that happens in the screen that takes you away from the information. And I'll also say, and so the headphones can be a tiny bit distracting, the Princess Leia thing. I'll also say, recently I was on a call with another production company, and I turned to do something, and the guy goes, "Are you wearing in-ears?" And I go, "Yeah, just little headphones. They're not molded or anything." And he's like, "Oh, we got to step up our game over here." And it was an interesting, for somebody in the know, it was an interesting nod to say, yeah, step up your game.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, go ahead, Kyle.
Sorry, I was going to say, I normally do wear over-the-ear headphones. These are my normal headphones, but today I'm trying the AirPods Pro as my in-ears, but I've also done these little JVC jobbers, which are just little cheap in-ear workarounds. But also, if you wanted to talk about Princess Leia, I've got these right here. If you want me to pull those out.
Now I have to move a little bit faster. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, it's tough for a guy that's been wearing headphones for 30 years to switch to IE, these in-ear things. And I think it's aesthetic, and it might be some logistical things that make it work better. But the first thing I've noticed, because I'm new to these, is that it concentrates you on what's being said and the voices of the people talking. It seems to be, I'm wearing a set of Shure. It seems to emphasize what really is most important is your intelligibility and your ability to respond to what's being said to you.
Go ahead, Kenneth.
Real quick, it depends on the audience that you're talking to as well. Sometimes what we do and how we do it is instructive. The microphone in frame says that microphones matter. The headphones on the ear say that, oh, maybe that will help me too. And then you can move to smaller in ears once you've established that headphones are a good thing in video conferencing.
Yeah, go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, I think for many people on calls, people with big headphones can be a bit distracting. So for the first time today, I'm using two in-ears to have two different signals, but the rest of the day, I'll have my little earpod in, my little ear thing in air. And I spend the day on Teams, and that is the most comfortable way to listen all day without it being distracting.
You go ahead, Courtney.
On this show, it's mostly Q&A, and so just voice stuff and comms is the main thing we're listening to. So I use an in-ear monitor. I do have my Sony MDV6s standing by if we're going to have a second-hour guest who is a musician or playing music or stereo music or playing music from the Office Hours band. I'll switch to the stereo headphones for critical listening.
Yeah, my recommendation is to get in your monitors. So I find that, and I don't wear them because it messes up my hair. Like so if I want air, but the overhead. But I think that they are a distraction, and we're not a radio. I mean, we are a radio show. We want to sound really, really good. But I feel like, especially with these little Linsols that are like $60 that are very high definition. For what we're doing here, would I try to mix an album with these? No, but for what we're doing here, I think that there's an incredible amount of detail, and so I don't think I need overhead over the ears, and I do think that it doesn't improve the look that we have here. So my request is always that people don't do that, but if they need to do it, there's some people can't put them in their ears or so on and so forth. We'll be flexible, but we highly recommend in-ear monitors for this. And again, the Linsols that I'm using, the LZ 10s or whatever, is like $60. Next question.
The next one comes to us from Lester Greenberg in Palm Springs, California. I have not yet ventured into After Hours territory. Is that a place where I can get some pro insights into my audio quality since I'm not pleased with it and need some advice?
Yeah, go ahead, Aaron.
Go into After Hours. Mickey, look for him. He did mine. I got Mickey approved. Every time I come into the show, everybody gives me a thumbs up without trying. So that's the quickest way to do it.
You go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, same thing. Mickey approved. After Hours is the perfect place, but be clear about the problem you're trying to solve, because sometimes you'll get a lot more help than you need without being clear about that.
Mitchell?
The best part is it's there. It's always there. So if you have a problem, you know that you have that backup. That helps.
Good, Tom.
I went to After Hours for the first time just last month. Roscoe and others were very friendly and very helpful. I'd say go for it.
Go ahead, Kenneth.
Absolutely. The best thing about After Hours is that it's free. However, free advice is sometimes worth every penny you pay for it. But come on over. It doesn't hurt to drop in and say hello.
Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, I was going to ask a question about audio hijack this morning, and before I could open my mouth, Lois asked the question, so I just watched. And that happens a lot. A lot of stuff comes up like that.
It's the geekiest water cooler in the world. Like it's just, there are just so many smart people that are just there all the time. 21 hours a day or whatever. There's someone who probably knows the answer to your question. It's an amazing group. I would highly recommend it. I listen to it like radio when I can, so I just turn it on and I just sit in the back. I don't even turn on my camera or my mic, and I just listen. And if there's something useful for me to say, I'll say it. But a lot of times I just sit there and listen to it, and that has replaced NPR for me. And I listened to NPR since I was 12, and I just listen to After Hours when I have the time, when I'm driving, when I'm doing other things. And then sometimes I jump in and say something, but a lot of times I just sit and watch and listen. And so it's a really amazing place. And it is a place, like a lot of times I go up there and I'll be calling out, I'll look for somebody like Mickey there, Mickey, I need to, when we answer the questions there, instead of a direct Zoom or Discord or whatever, it means that all of us learn it. So when I have a question, it's not under NDA. I can just I think of how to say the question in a way that won't be, get into things that would get me in trouble. And then I go in and I do it specifically in After Hours so that we can have the conversation, because that's how we invest in our group. This is a persistent group that we want everyone to get smarter because it'll all keep accelerating. Next question.
Peter Moore in Auckland, New Zealand has the most fun one of today, I think. How would office hours handle the logistics of Rockin' 1000 coming to the USA or to Australia, New Zealand, apart from the obvious issues? What would the front of house look like for something this big? It's rehearsed and conducted. Thoughts? And he's got the link there for that insanity.
Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, it's awesome. There was 1,000 musicians that were all playing together. It looked like they had wireless headphones on, so I'm imagining that they would have been some sort of RF that was super low latency, obviously. So it's trying to keep everyone in time. But the thing is, things that work big work small, and this is just a question of scale. And so if you think about it having 1,000, now it would have been more than 1,000 inputs, but let's say it was 1,000 inputs and you had 40 channel mixers, consoles, then you need 25, right? So you could imagine having 25 consoles separated around. You have separate audio engineers for each one of those. And then that comes into a larger console for the final mix. And so actually, very large scale things all break down to small things. It comes down to one microphone going into a channel, that going off to another channel. And it's all about workflow.
Go, Geoffrey, real quick.
Yeah, they basically, this is basically how it looked. Everybody had in-ears in there, and they were running it just fine. And as for office hours, we are already doing that with the happy birthday song. So
there we go. Right. Next question.
Hasmuk, our friend in Cape Town, South Africa, says, on the road, joining old webinars, have no view of panel, miss the banter, mic checks, pearls of wisdom. Can we feed the program in with a gallery view before the YouTube feed?
Yeah, we should be able to do that. That's definitely a doable process. A lot of it, you're going to find that we add a lot more things back in over time. I think right now we're just trying to make it work. So there's just a lot of, for the next week and a half, you can expect it to just be getting it to be a minimal viable product. And then after that, we'll start adding things and making it better, adding behind the scenes, adding other viewing windows. All those things are going to start building up around it. Next question.
Paul Wallace of Austin, Texas, here on the panel says, one of our panel members, Courtney, is a voting member of the Screen Actors Guild. I'd like his comments and others on the SAG Awards and how they are being produced this year, and also who votes on the in memoriam inclusions.
And Bill, I'm going to hand this off to you for the next question or two. I just have a little issue I got to handle here.
Not a problem. Go ahead,
Courtney.
Okay. I don't know how the production is going to be handled this year. Voting closes today, so I better get in gear here and get my voting in. I just went to the website, tried to click on, there's a panel that says voting open now, and at 4:04, so I don't know if I'll be able to vote. The ceremony is on the 28th, and I think you can view it online and streaming, and it has changed. Paul was telling me they're carrying it on TBS or TNT, one of the Turner stations, live. So that'll be interesting. And I have to get busy and vote. That's, there are a lot of categories that covers both television and film and ensemble casts. So that's some voting categories that you don't normally see in the Academy Awards. So looking forward to seeing the show virtually or online.
And Mitchell Hill had a note.
I hope they don't go the way of the Academy Awards presentation, because the editors are in an uproar about things that are being cut out of the show that really deserve the attention, and some technical awards are completely cut out. So I hope that doesn't happen to SAG.
And Paul Wallace wants to get in on this.
Yeah, follow-up question for Courtney. The in memoriam, how do they determine that? Do you vote on that also? You're muted.
No, I think the Grim Reaper votes on that, and he's the only voting member that determines the in memoriam.
Well, they have like over 100 in memoriams on the website. Surely they're going to call that down, aren't they?
I don't know. A lot of times they'll try and be as inclusive as possible, but it's usually the in memoriam is only the people that have passed away in the last year since the last in memoriam.
Does the Grim Reaper have a SAG card? A seat card?
No, but he's the only voting member.
been in enough projects.
All right. He's everybody's voting member. All right, next question.
Lester Greenberg in Palm Springs, California is up next with, as I am collecting all of these devices, thanks to you all, the job of keeping my desk clean is getting tougher. How do you manage all the stuff, small and large, the pieces of equipment needed to have a nice setup? Are there any undermounted to the desk?
Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of a clean desk and work environment. And the best thing I did was to set up all the active gear, with fans and things in another room. Like actually it's just through the wall. And it keeps everything really nice and quiet in here, which is actually good atmosphere to work in as well as for sound. And it's not all that difficult running extra long cables and doing USB and things like that. So anything that can be further away that you don't need to have hands on, I would do that and use a Stream Deck to control things remotely and things like that. It works great.
Greg?
Yeah, I'm also a big fan of having things out of sight, out of reach. So I'll typically have things connected that I'm tearing apart and putting back together on my desk. But then once I get it situated and I understand it's not going to change all that much, I'll put it either under or behind, either with ordered rack. Actually, I just ordered another bracket for my M1 Mini to put it under the desk. It's just a nicer way to work with all of that away.
Go ahead, Geoffrey.
My primary desk, I've talked about this before, is actually on wheels, so I could actually roll this off if I needed to. Yeah, my desk gets messy. I do a project a day, and then the next project, a review or whatever. I have a side desk that I'll put things to if I need to work on them. And then ultimately I have a box that things will go into. And then if I don't touch that box within a month or two, I will see what items need to be taken to Goodwill, given away or whatever, and then or put back into some sort of storage.
Next question.
Eduardo Augustine in Panama says, which is a good mini PC to run SPX-GC, H2R graphics, PlayoutBee, and so forth?
Go ahead, Serge.
I have two recommendations. The first one is going to be a Mac Mini, because you have the used Mac Mini will not be that expensive. You will have a good computer with the DOS included. Intel Nokia is another recommendation, but you need to know Linux. If not, you need a Windows license, and that's getting more expensive than just buying a Mac Mini.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, I've used a lot of the, of course, B-Links by Courtney. They don't make these anymore, 4125s.
They stopped making them?
Huh?
They stopped making them?
The little ones. They make the double highs. They're twice as high. But and they make a lot of those. So, and they have them in every flavor and every type of processor, from Ryzen 5s down to the Intel i5s and i7s. So you can use those. What I used for years on the set for Playout was something like this, which is a Quantum Access stick PC. It has, Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and HDMI out, and does 1080p beautifully, and it comes with a full version of Windows 10, and it's a complete Windows machine. And also, the smaller PCs all come with Windows on them or Linux. You can choose your operating system. So they will all run, most of them will run PlayoutBee or any of the browser-based H2R graphics that are browser-based, no problem at all. And since it's a complete Windows interface, you can still use it for running PowerPoint, and anything that'll run on Windows will run on it. So that's my solution.
Yeah, I think that we have a lot of the the B-Links by Courtney. So we have a bunch of B-Links and a lot of Mac Minis. That's where we get a lot of our small, what I would consider kind of glue computers. The one thing I will say is I typically wouldn't try to run all of those things on one computer. I assume that's not what you're saying. You just want to run one at a time, but I would get a little PC for everything that I wanted to do, as opposed to having little PCs try to do lots of things. Next question.
Oh, and I might point out, these are like $130.
That's great.
You can get about 5 of them for the price of one Mac Mini.
There you go. Next question.
Next question comes from Kenny Hampton in Greenville, Illinois. He says, Zoom has a feature in share screen under advanced, which lets you share a camera source in the share window. Zoom indicates it will share the second camera. How can you choose which camera to share if you have more than 2 cameras?
Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, this is the type of thing that's a legacy of old video conference systems, right? It used to be the way that video conference systems would have 2, often dual screens, and in big conference rooms will have dual screens, and you could put screen share, and then you could put another camera on, or you could do a camera and then do a document camera, and so they'd have these people with these little weird cameras, and you could do something underneath. I feel like we've moved on from that, where we're not pushing simultaneous cameras out. We're doing that ourselves using things like the ATEM, and we can do picture-in-picture, and we can do super sources and things like that if we need to do two things. But often it's a much smoother process when we can choose, now we're going to go full screen, and we can focus people's attention rather than them getting confused with how the screens are displayed.
Yeah, go ahead, Serge.
You're going to have a lower frame rate, but that's a neat trick to bump up your screen resolution, because if you don't have a 1080p zoom, using the screen share with the second camera will reduce the frame rate, but bump you to 1080p.
Go ahead, Roscoe.
And this little voice in chat told me that you just have to cycle through them, and the voice works at Zoom, so I think that's a good recommendation.
Next question.
Todd Davis in Hutchinson, Kansas is up next. He says, how much have you all thought about copyright infringement, specifically in a panelist presenter background? Do you police each other?
Go ahead, Geoffrey.
I do that all the time. In a corporate situation, I will scan the people's backgrounds if I'm doing any type of view or recording or anything like that. Make sure that there's nothing that's going to get them in trouble, not only with like a brand or something like that, but also with the company itself, because sometimes they just don't think about those backgrounds right there. Other than that, I think about a lot of copyright. Like, for instance, the question we had a couple of shots ago, I showed you a picture of the video. I didn't show you the video at all, because that can always create some sort of controversy right there. So a single frame was a little bit better to show from there. But other than that, a lot of us are using plain backgrounds, so it's kind of easy to police this group.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I wouldn't sweat anything in the background, because this is a non-profit situation, so you would never actually, no one would be successful in suing you over copyright infringement. And this is an educational program, so it matches the fair use. And most things that are in the background are out of focus enough or small enough in the frame not to trigger the copyright rejection bots. So I wouldn't worry about anything in the background myself. Unless like Geoffrey says, it's a corporate head of Coke and you've got a Pepsi logo over his shoulder or something, a competitive product in the background of one of the guests on the show. That would be kind of rude. But other than that, I wouldn't worry about it.
Real quick, Bill.
Yeah, this has been, for this kind of show, it's not really a problem, because I do think we fit under fair use. If you're doing any other kind of content, and if you're putting on larger shows, it becomes mission critical, because there are bots that can take you down now. And there's also copyright is complex. Go to the Stanford University website, look at Title 17. They've broken it down into human talk. And for U.S. copyright, that'll make you a lot smarter than you are going in.
Next question.
Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas says, following up on the SAG Awards, what are your picks for Best Picture, Lead Supporting Male Actor and Female Actor? And there's a link there to the Guild Awards.
Go ahead, Paul, real quick.
I would have to say that Don't Look Up would be the best picture, because it's the only one I've seen. And then as far as Best Actor, it'd be Benedict Cumberbatch in the Power of the Dog. But the Power of the Dog, I thought, was the best picture. And those are my picks.
When Ben Burt didn't win for, I said this before, for Wall-E for Best Sound Design, I stopped watching the awards. Like all of them. Like it just suddenly just opened up this, like, I stopped watching the Oscars, then I stopped watching everything else, and then I just stopped caring. So anyway, it's all politics. Next question.
Stuart F. in Melbourne, Australia says, more Pi. Anyone got any links to or tutorials to activate the I2S audio input, ton of output tutes for media players and nothing for recording? I
think you might have stumped us. I don't think we even understand what you're asking. You have to come on and talk about it maybe on After Hours. Next question.
Next question comes from Lois Richter in Davis, California. She says, in a practice BWL Birding with Lois webinar, I had 4 devices on Zoom using different accounts. We were told that there was too much video coming out of our house and it caused problems in the back end. Should we worry about too many screens in a regular meeting?
Go ahead, Aaron.
So I've done this before, and the biggest thing is what's your internet speed. Make sure you've tested it and you know what you're pushing out and what you can pull up and down on that. I've had success on it at my location. I know other people that I've dealt with have had lower internet speeds, and so it's affecting the back end on that because the internet jitter and everything else on that. So check your speed, and then that will start giving you a base of what you can and can't do at your location.
Grant.
Yeah, I'd want to make sure that all of those machines are on Ethernet is a really important thing. And to do a speed test, know exactly what you've got. As an example, on this call now, I'm pushing out 1080 at 30, and it's about 4 to 5 meg is how much that's using going up, megabit per second. And then coming down is about 6 or 7. And then if I go to full screen active speaker, it drops down a little bit, around 5. And so if you calculate that out, and generally try to double what you actually need is you kind of want to have double the headroom to be able to make sure that's going to work well for you.
Yeah, we would, if someone asked us, we want to do 4 outs, we would tell them they need 50 megabits up per second, 50 megs up. It's a little, because it's a double the 6. Although when Grant talked about it, I looked up and I realized I'm doing 1080p and I'm doing 10 megs up, which is up and down. I'm wondering if Zoom has changed its.
Have you got Dante running on? Are you looking at the Zoom specifically, or?
Zoom's the only thing pushing up. Interesting. So it's much faster than I expected. Let's see. Yeah. Anyway, so next question.
Joel in Mumbai, India says, has anybody used Node CG, had a project related to elections, wanted to know if it would be a good solution for election graphics?
And by the way, I want to correct that. There's something going on as a kernel task going on. So it is just simply the 5 to 6 megs that Grant was talking about. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Joel, it's a good question. Node CG I have not used, but I want to push you towards New Blue. They have a whole suite of products that probably are easier to get started with, and also they can suck in all that digital data to be represented as a graphic. So it's New Blue would be my recommendation.
Node CG looks really cool. Anything that says Node, I usually go, okay, this is going to be good. But a lot of us are using SPX for that. That's what we're using. That's what you're seeing on this show right now. Next question.
Tony Mobley in Noonan, Georgia says, is there a way to accelerate learning for DaVinci Resolve?
Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, Blackmagic have a lot of really good videos now on YouTube. They've done a lot of effort in getting that right. 2 other thoughts for you. One, I think it's hard to move from one editing software to the other if you're spending all your time reaching back to one used before. So you sort of have to clear your cache and start again and understand the basics of the layout. The third thing is that it's the same way as you get to Carnegie Hall, as the old joke goes, practice, practice, practice.
Yeah, the Ripple training is really good, really well put together, really efficient to learn Resolve. If you just go through all their tutorials, because that comes with footage, it comes with things you can do. The Blackmagic stuff on is good. Blackmagic also, if you look at training on their website, they also have they do webinars, and they can answer your questions, and they walk through the interface, and they walk through all kinds of different areas like mixing in surround, Dolby Atmos, and doing color correction, and doing those other things. And so those are some other places that you can look to find out more information. But but I would start with Ripple if I was trying to get off the ground. Next question.
Alex Forty Goldner in London in the UK says, yesterday was the last day of the Hollywood Professional Association Tech Retreat in Palm Springs. Did anyone hear about what was discussed?
Courtney.
I have not heard about what was discussed. This year was their first time back in quite a while, and as you can see here from their website, which you can go to hpa.org and find out more about it, it was completely sold out because they limited because of COVID-19 the attendance, and so they must have had a good attendance. At that website, perhaps you can find copies of the presentation for streaming later. But since it is a paid event, a lot of times those will be by subscription only.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I have a couple of friends who were there, and I haven't heard a lot from them because they've been busy there. But generally, the comments they have made have been positive about it. So I think it's valuable for those who can afford to go to those kinds of high-end things.
Next question.
Stuart F. in Melbourne, Australia says Raspivid Mjpg-Streamer motion are all a pain to set up for intranet streaming from a PI4B with an HDMI-to-CSI adapter. Any other suggested apps, and Mjpg-Streamer as a plugin with Octoprint is the easiest non-NDI option he's found so far.
See, now the problem is, Stuart, is that if someone asked that question, we would expect you to answer the question, not us to answer the question. So you have to come back on the panel because we need you to answer that question because we don't know. Next question.
Stuart's been gone too long.
Exactly.
Harshit in Daytona Beach, Florida is up next, and he says, what's your recommendation for a chest mount for a phone, 6.4 to 6.8 inches? Would you prefer another method instead of for phones?
Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, so I mean, GoPro is the best at this, right? There's so many adapters for that, and if you were trying to do it because you want to do the phone because you want to do live streaming, you can do that. Connect the GoPro to your phone and then stream. However, if you really wanted to do that, what you can get is a mount, a cell phone mount that has the GoPro adapter on it. So then you can use all of the GoPro wearable stuff with a cell phone adapter on it. Works awesome.
Yeah, that is exactly what I have here. Let's see if I can show this. This is the Peak design, and this has a little mount here, and this will go on. I got the wrong one. I grabbed the wrong one, but this has got the GoPro mount, but it'll usually clip into here, and then it's GoPro mount. But you definitely want to use the GoPro harnesses. Let's go to the next question.
Next question comes to us again from Harshit in Daytona Beach. He said, should the site have a section for deals of the day for AV equipment, especially new release products that people can find via the Office Hours site?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I certainly hope not, because it would turn into a huge mess. But what you're getting instead of that is you're getting personal recommendations from the panel and other people that know. So if you go to like event chat and after hours, you're going to see a lot of good information. You just got to look for it. It's there.
Go ahead, Serge.
And I saw, and I did a few times posts on Discord for a link to a 50% rebate or things like that. I think it's preferable.
Yeah, we're working with a couple of folks. We're going to probably have a couple in the near future where they're specific for us. That's what I'm looking for. I'm not that interested in promoting other people's promotions. As far as that goes, I'm fine if people do it, if you post it in Discord, but it's not going to get any. I'm not interested. So what I'm interested in helping push out is when we get something that's even deeper, that's for our members, that's really customized for our needs with partners that are really part of that part of our community. That's the kind of thing that we'd like to promote heavily to our users to make sure that those things are successful. And we've got one coming next week. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, things change so quickly. I'm not so much interested in like dollars and cents deals, but more like information. Like I would love to have a repository where you could say, this is a short article about, like maybe from Mickey explaining, his best practices for getting good audio, or, little bits of information. But then again, things change so quickly. So it's hard to do. It's almost better to just have what we do here. Just, today, this is what we think is the best practice.
Yeah, I think that there's some things that we can kind of bubble up and keep on updating. So I think that, how we build our kits and what kind of mics we're using. And, here's 3 mics that we like, in different price points. And here's a discussion about them. And I think some of it is evergreen, understanding how mics work. Some of it is how we're doing it right now. Some of it, and we just have to kind of play with that. And I definitely plan to have a lot more of that kind of thing on the site. Next question.
Elliot Robinson in Las Vegas is back up with, did something change on color settings because some skin tones do not look as good as before?
I don't think anything's changed on the color for all of these. I think you're just seeing it more clearly than it was before, and so I think that's all. Yeah, we're not changing the color. Yeah, next question.
Zach Manley in Denton, Texas, up next with, I have read the Zoom documentation on system requirements. What is the panel's minimum spec for a Zoom PC for a remote guest specifically?
Grant.
Yeah, I mean, generally it works on almost every device that you can think of, but to have it work really well for a remote guest, I think the M1 Mac Mini is a great machine to do what you need to do. If you prefer PC, then the Intel NUC, the newer ones have 3 display outputs. They have a whole bunch of inputs of USB-C and 3, and so generally you get like an i7, and even with the integrated graphics on that, it'll work fine.
Good, Courtney.
Zoom has a little bit of an artificial limitation for 1080p, which we're lucky enough to have access to a 1080p account here. If not, it's 720p for most meetings. Will limit you. Zoom will limit you to that, and almost anything can handle that. So if you got a 1080p account, you'll need something with at least 4 cores, or actually more than 4 cores, or 4 threads. So if you have an Intel i7 that's got 4 cores, it has to be able to not be a Celeron and be able to do 8 threads. The Mac Minis, of course, the newer M1s can do that, but the older ones may not be able to if they're based on the Intel Core 2 Duos. They may not be able to have enough threads to pass their artificial barrier of more than 4 threads.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says, how do they manage short changeovers between acts at large music festivals?
Go ahead, Bill.
Well, the first and foremost, there's usually what's called a backline on stage that feeds everything to everything. So the musicians understand this, and when they do their performance checks ahead of time, they understand, and the tech crew helping them understands where to plug in what. So it's not like the old days when a band had to take all of its equipment off stage and then all bring it on stage custom. Now, that does still happen, I understand, but generally the amount of changeability between acts is reduced by that kind of really good advanced planning and everybody knowing in advance exactly what people are going to be playing in this configuration.
Go, Geoffrey.
I call it chaos because that's what it is. It's all hands on deck. The big thing is getting the things like the microphones off the drums and stuff like that before you start moving stuff around. Otherwise, people are going to be tripping over cables and going from there. So there is a structure to it. Usually a lot of things push to left and then place in left from there. That way you don't get too much confusion, but it really depends on the event because I've seen chaos happen fairly easy.
Yeah, I've worked on a fair number of festivals, and usually what happens is that the smaller bands are stacked in front of the larger bands, so the bigger sets are in the back and the smaller bands are in the front, and they just keep on pulling them back. And usually they're just pulling that stuff out, and they oftentimes are pretty organized about how they're going to pull that stuff out because they have a small amount of time. The other way to handle it is multiple stages. So, hey, this stage is closed now, but we'll be open back. We'll be back. And then finally, just reminding people that the beer is in the back. All right, next question.
Douglas Carmichael is again up. In a Reddit thread about the White House Ukraine announcement, they mentioned that 2 mono sources, mixed ambient audio, are standard for press conferences. What have your experiences been working on large press events?
Let's go pretty quick here. Mitchell?
Most organized press events have somebody doing a press feed, and that means there's a press box somewhere on the floor near where the press people hang out, and you just plug in right there, and there could be a mono and stereo and so on and so forth, but there's usually a bunch of different taps on a distribution system.
Go ahead, Grant.
I worked on international cricket sound for the press conferences, and we stopped everyone from bringing all their mics in, and we just had a splitter and gave them all that, and they couldn't put their own up there, and we controlled it.
Yeah, it's the way to go. Roscoe?
5 American presidents, and I didn't get an ambient feed, so I must not be going to large enough events. So it was just, you're responsible for your own ambience.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, what they said, usually there's a press box, which is an active splitter. It'll have one input, and it'll have 30 or 40 XLR outputs. And in the old days, they'd have a video distribution as well. So you're tied into the net feed. Basically, the network feed goes to all the press field cameras that they can choose from that. And a lot of times they'll have a microphone on top of the camera that will go into a second channel just for ambience and room questions that aren't on the feed.
Yeah, on a lot of these, what you're looking for is a mult box. Is what if you're searching for something to see. A mult box is usually some kind of stack. The best ones nowadays are Dante based. So you don't. The biggest problem with mult box is buzz, because you're getting ground loops because everyone's plugging into different things. So managing the power and how you're handling giving the press power, super valuable. And then if you have any kind of leverage, a lot of times I'm there on behalf of the person that's talking up front. You get an aux out of the mixer and let the press have the mount box. Next question.
Craig McFarlane in Boston says, for those wearing glasses using ring lights, wasn't there a polarizing option to avoid the obvious ring reflection?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
You're going to have problems with ring lights and reflections in glasses because you can't get the light up high enough. Because if I bent back, you're going to see my key light right there kicking in. So ring lights are just generally not good for doing that, and polarizing is not going to solve the problem.
Next question.
Zach Marley in Denton, Texas says, using Dante, is there a way to send Dante audio digitally to cameras? Are there cameras that could use a Dante USB Avio, or is an AES3 EBU Avio the only option?
Okay. Grant?
Yeah, you may be able to jerry rig something, but I would say using the XLR to Dante Avio converter is the best way to go. It's a really short XLR, and it'll go into analog audio, and the camera will know how to use that.
Good, Courtney.
Yeah, I like what Grant says. I don't know of any cameras other than maybe some PTZ cameras that have a network in that could use Dante directly without an adapter go to analog or AES EBU. So the thing that Mitch is holding up there, an adapter, could work, but that's going to be your best bet, or go just a regular digital AES3 in.
Next question.
Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana is up next. Chris says, I'm working on a layout for a pack-out surface that will have 2 computers, 2 cameras, and a light, 2 monitors, and iPad, all on 2 poles. I hope other than CAD, what are people using for pre-vis layouts?
The 2 that we use most, well, the one that we've used the most is SketchUp. It's a lot less expensive than CAD, and it's really, really easy to learn to throw that together. The one that we're using, I'm on a project right now that we're using, is Unreal Engine, and it works really well. We're laying out a stage, and putting people in there and figuring out where the lights are and where the truss is. And you can buy, for like $40, you can buy like the whole stage, like all the models, and so and Unreal Engine, of course, is free itself. So it's actually turned out to be a really great pre-vis tool, and really, I would highly recommend checking it out. A lot of those things that you just laid out will be free models in the marketplace, so you'll be able to just grab them or pay $1 or $2 for them and then throw them in there, and then they all look fairly realistic. All right, we are now shifting gears to. I'd like to welcome Geoffrey Orthwein and Andrew Sullivan to Office Hours. Hi, guys.
Hey, Alex. Good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you too. Welcome. And now you are working on yet another film. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. Yeah. And first, for those who don't know us, I'm Geoffrey Orthwein.
Andrew Sullivan.
That's Andy Sullivan. A few years ago, we made the film Bokeh, and we're starting up again on a film that Andy wrote called I Don't Want to Drink Your Blood Anymore is the full title.
Oh, I took the title from what you put on Twitter. I was like, well,
the title is longer than the Twitter limit. So that's where we are.
Apparently, we only make titles that are the shortest word, like Bokeh or I Don't Want to Drink Your Blood Anymore. So it's either 1 word or 8 words. There's nothing in between.
There's nothing in between. Although I had to find something in between 4 Twitter handles. And we came up with I Don't Want Blood. So there you go. You can find us all there. Anyway, it's a little vampire story. Why don't you tell them about it?
Yeah, I'll jump into. Is it on there? Oh yeah, you go, Alex.
And as people are listening, as of course as Andrew and Geoffrey are talking, definitely throw those questions in. We'll jump to the questions right after they give us a little overview of what they're working on.
We're going to give a little context, hopefully help.
And when are you shooting it? What are the dates?
We start principal photography on March 24th. So less than a month away now. We're speeding towards the kickoff right now, and we'll wrap mid-April. So it'll be about 4 weeks of shooting.
So yeah, the last film we did, Bokeh, we shot in Iceland. We shot it over 40 locations, basically
in the middle of the night.
A lot of the nice part is it was about an apocalypse, but unlike normal apocalypses that have fire or aliens or monsters or transformers or superheroes. Everyone disappeared. There was no explanation. And so Iceland has daylight in June, 23 to 24 hours a night. So when we needed an empty city, we just shot at 3 a.m. and we could the world was ours, basically. So
yeah,
a lot of times when you're making your second film, it's often referred to as it's a response to your first film, whether consciously or subconsciously. And so last one was 40 plus locations in Iceland. This one takes place about 80% in one house. Partly from the emotional state I was in during the early part of the pandemic. So this isn't a pandemic movie in any way, but it definitely has some of that emotional currency that
we've all been shut in. Yeah. All right. He's got a few slides, so I'm going to just go ahead and. So that's the film.
Yeah. So I don't want to drink your blood anymore. And again, this is just to give you context for your questions. I'll talk a little bit just about the log line, an agoraphobic and a log line. And again, I'm sure you all know this. So it's just basically that elevator pitch. When I am trying to get actors, crew, investors, anyone involved in the film, I want to be able to describe the film within a sentence. So an agoraphobic vampire is unwilling to leave her family's home, causing her to not only lose track of time, but time itself. And again, even those first three words, an agoraphobic vampire. Simply put, I was jogging during the early days of COVID, and it just kind of hit me that I myself felt like a vampire, someone who wasn't able to leave their house when they wanted to. I was up at night, not up in the day. I lost track of what was a Tuesday, what was a Wednesday. The foods I wanted to eat, I couldn't get to. So that kind of agoraphobic vampire is what I just felt about myself in a way. And I thought, what would be the hardest thing for a vampire to do is someone who wants blood, who wants sacrifice, who wants all these things and can't leave her house. So the story takes place over a 50-year period. And like I said, I'm not going to read the director's statement anyways, but these are the things that we share to make the package attractive for cast, crew, and everyone we're trying to get on board, is to understand what we're trying to do.
It's part of the process of just pulling in all the creative partners, is kind of having a basic idea of what path we're going down beyond just the script itself.
And I'm unfortunately or fortunately a sucker for making a keynote presentation. I'll make one for anything. So just anytime I need to give. I'm a very visual person, and anytime I can help, whether it's our production designer, whether it's a cast member, whoever it is, just trying to basically help tell what I'm seeing in my mind to help them be able to make better decisions. So one of the first things we looked at before we jumped to Jeff on storyboards was having that discussion with our DP, Una, about talking about aspect ratios, talking about lenses, talking about light and look. And so I'm just going to go through a little bit of this quickly, again, to help inform the discussion here. Again, Boca, when we shot this, Iceland is beautiful. It's beautiful when it's ugly. And so it was a very widescreen film we shot then. We were shooting locations everywhere, the largest waterfalls in Europe, geysers, just these abandoned plains, these black sand beaches. And so this is a very different film. This is a much more claustrophobic film. I kind of used a couple case studies a lot of times when you're making a film, you try to get inspiration for everywhere. So this was 10 Cloverfield Lane. They have a 2.35. That's what we're going to have for our film. I really like kind of their 70s look in terms of their yellows and their lights, the lack of light. If ours is about an agoraphobic vampire, she's mostly in her house by herself until she isn't. And a lot of it is kind of this low light level. They kind of had these moods of blues in the basement and yellows up top. Thoroughbreds, this one has a bit more in the range of the blue and that perfect moonlight that somehow just hits that window angle perfectly and lights everything. A different type of light, but again, and part of the reason I created this deck wasn't just to kind of settle on 235 with the production team and with our DP, but also to just talk about what is the extreme low light want. Because if we can figure and dial in the low light, we can easily build more light all the time. So it was really just about understanding our edges. Like, what is the least amount of light I can get away with? Which brought us to the Handmaiden. There's no human in the world who looks at the Handmaiden and wouldn't want to make a deck out of this. And because of, again, how they use light in this, and there's a lack of electricity, a lack of light in general, they are just, they are sculptors in terms of just how do you use just dark to define light. Again, I love black and white photography, and people a lot of the times make the mistake that you're staring at the light and it's true that you are looking at the white space, but you're doing that because of the black lines, not because of the white space. And so anytime I can do silhouettes and sculpt with shadows, I like to. So it's this lack of light. The last one I'll talk about is Ghost Story. And though we're not doing a 1-3-3, David Lowery is one of my favorite directors right now. Green Knight is just this incredible film that he did this year. Angel Body Saints. Jeff and I adore David Lowery and his light and things. And just in this film, basically, he also has a very natural, very low light. He doesn't want it to look like large LEDs. He doesn't want to look like a light package. He wants it to look like the only things lighting people in a house are the lights they'd have in their house, which is very much the type of light we're going for. That's it from the presentation standpoint, just to give you a little bit of an idea. We're happy to answer any questions on any aspect of the film, but just a starting point there.
Yeah, and I think it's great. Like one of the things when I'm working on something is I gather hundreds of photos of things that I like, like that make me feel that way, or that we're trying to kind of put together. So you can definitely get a sense of where the film's going when you look at that, and when you all agree to it, which is
and we do. I mean, I've got a deck of because she's a Japanese American. A third generation. I've got a deck of Japanese photography that I take the production design through from and it takes place over the 70s to 2020. So understanding kind of her 50 years, how would she be affected by her parents who lived in America? How would she be affected by her grandparents who were born in Japan? Right. There's a lot of great World War II, a lot of rebellious World War II Japanese photography that kind of informs some of the looks of the film and things. And so, I mean, I think it's a lot of times when you're making a film, it is easy to just look at other films and not necessarily fight to find inspiration from other places that really help kind of inform the details more than we want to look like this film.
Yeah. There's also a certain amount of, we're still all working remotely and we're on a limited budget. So putting together these documents so that we can get those sort of tonal touch points across all the crew, which right now is spread across 4 different states right now. And then we'll all show up in Massachusetts next month. But it's just it's helpful for the remote collaboration.
I found it fascinating. I went from 0 to 100. So my first film was Star Wars. And so I worked on the pre-vis, and we spent all this time in pre-vis. And what I thought was really interesting is how little independent filmmakers, you're the exclusion of that, but how independent filmmakers don't spend as much time on pre-vis. They have a shot list, and there's no storyboards. There's no, and you're like, this is where it matters the most. Because if we ran out of money, George would just throw more money into it, but he'd yell and then throw more money into it. And then, but if an independent filmmaker runs out of money, you don't have that shot anymore. There's nowhere to go.
Context for your audience: Star Wars is a little film that came out a couple decades ago.
Exactly. It's a little B film.
It's a small little thing.
Yeah,
so
exactly. But it was
we just appreciate these small indie films out there. I think. I
think that what is fun about it, though, is I've obviously worked on smaller films. And that was my first one was the largest film I ever worked on. Then I never worked on one like that again. And so a lot of the smaller films, what I loved about it is that the whole crew is there. It's not this. There's a personality to it, and you're in real sets. When I shot ours, half of it was green, and so it was. I didn't shoot it. When I did effects with it, half of it was green. For yours, you really have to be efficient, right? I mean, you have a month to shoot. Can you tell us what the budget is? Is that?
Yeah, I can tell you directly. I mean, it's roughly around the $500,000 mark, which it's roughly the same budget we had for Boca. And Boca was in Iceland, lots of locations. We brought half our crew out there. So, I mean, it is a lot less landscape this time. Cast is bigger, crew is bigger. We were able to ask a lot of people to do favors. It was the first feature for us, and it was the first feature for some of them. So
I mean, it's not a micro budget film. We're low budget, but not micro budget. But there's one of the fun things about it is both in Iceland and coming up next month is there's a little bit of a summer camp feeling. Everybody kind of goes. We show up. Like you said, it's a small enough crew that there's not really fragmentation. It's everybody's going to be in one house working together, and that's just a fun vibe. Even when it gets stressful.
And to your point about pre-vis, and we'll get to storyboards and things like that. But even outside of the storyboards, when I think about it, is we are trying to fix our film in pre, right? Everyone says fix your film in post. We don't have the budget. For that, we have to do as much fixing and pre-production as you can. You're running all the time, but fix it in pre is kind of our motto for how we're doing in terms of this. And quite frankly, the reason to make these decks and everything else is that if I'm not conveying my idea to everyone else to help them get their jobs done, that failure's on me. It's not on anyone else. It's that I haven't been able to figure out a way to communicate effectively for everyone else to be able to do their jobs in it. So, I mean, I don't know if we overthink pre, because I'm not even sure you can barely overthink pre-production, but it's we definitely try to put as much energy into it as possible.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I mean, so not so long ago, I went through and I built the entire post budget, and there's not a budget to fix it. There's a post budget to complete the film, but we have to hit our targets, and that's what the pre-pro's about.
Let's jump into the questions. First question.
Our first one comes from Alex 40 Goldner in London. He says, when crewing up a film like this, when do different people start? For example, although the editor might be consulted, an assistant editor has more initial work to do, perhaps.
Indeed. All right. So Andy wrote the script, and he's directing it. I came on to start producing it, and then we brought on another producer last summer. In terms of the next crew heads, we were initially targeting the fall to shoot, and we bumped it because for a lot of reasons. So over the course of the end of the holidays and then January and even up through this week, we're tapping crew. Most of it is production crew. We have been targeting, kind of circling around some pre-post positions, editor on set, media manager, DIT, kind of hybrids. I think Alex is completely right. Hey, Alex Goldner. That the assistant editor probably does have a lot of opinions and perspective. At this point, there's only so many favors we want to call in and ask, which if you haven't heard from me lately, I'll probably be calling you for a favor soon. So basically, I've spent a lot of time in editing and cutting and kind of understanding the post process. So to the assistant editor position, I'm kind of just relying on my own knowledge base right now, so that we can save our favors for the bigger asks.
Next question.
Alex is right back again with another one. This time he says, film budgeting. Have you done any deals in advance so that you have all the money for production and post-production? And if so, how did you set your budget?
We do have our money for our production and post-production. We're working with Massachusetts on tax grants, and also I think we filled in forms to not have to pay taxes within there. So, I mean, we looked at New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York, Massachusetts in terms of who had generous tax grants, which state was easy to work with, because some states have great tax grants, but you don't get the money for 3 or 4 years, especially during COVID times. Everything, you're all aware, I don't need to tell you, gets delayed. And so being able to get back, say, 25% of your budget, that's nothing small there. So right away, we take about 25% of our budget off through tax grants and everything else.
The tax credits are huge. They for better, for worse, they determine a lot. There were states that we were starting to be interested in, and when we got into the details of the tax credits, they became untenable. So we moved on. We moved on to other states.
Hasn't it really just moved to you shoot in New York or California because of infrastructure, or you shoot in a taxed state? You don't want to tax.
Like and California is one where it's just like, if you're under $1 million, we're not going to do anything for you tax wise. At least that used to be the way. And so, I mean, states are actually, there are certain states that are still willing to work with indies, but the amount of streaming channels that have come on board, and just now there's Mayor of Easttown and there's shows everywhere. Like, states have run out of their money, and they're less indie friendly. Some states less indie friendly than they've ever been, because they just don't need us.
There's also much more infrastructure than there was. It used to be New York and California, maybe Chicago. Now, obviously, Atlanta, but also, there's a certain amount of infrastructure in Boston, in Philadelphia, in Detroit. Although Michigan kind of threw everybody under the bus with their tax program, but So there's more options.
And it's really become a long play. I mean, you look at Georgia and Louisiana and New Mexico, which really kind of pioneered the whole thing. And New Mexico has massive sound stages
they really
and studios.
Do, right? There's incredible states where, I mean, so that I'm answering Alex's question, because it was partly only half the answer, is that we made Boca, we were fortunate enough to be able to sell the film, and then they sold it to Netflix, and we got all our money back on Boca, right? So we were able to put the money back into this film to make it. I do bring a couple investors on board. I'm fortunate enough to be able to put some of my own money into this. I'm not going to make a film like this that has inherent risk if I'm not able to put some of my own skin in the game. And I've been very clear with investors. Indie film is the worst thing to invest in. You probably don't want to do it. But
we'll take your money. We'll take your money.
If you're going to do it, you should invest in me because I'm good at getting money back to people. So I'm like, there's not, my first sentence is always, you should never invest in indie film, but maybe invest in mine.
Right. There's sharks in the water, but I've been
have
doing
to work on that first.
Yeah, no, but it's somehow just being like that open is what gets people to invest in it, not gets people to walk away from it.
Absolutely. Next question.
Sky Gleason in Seattle, Washington's up next. It's been said that there are 3 stories that you create. One, the one you write, the one you shoot, and the one you edit. Is this true for your filmmaking experience?
100%.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And sometimes, and in the editing one, you're doing 3 other stories.
Yeah. There's actually 6 stories.
Yeah. It's editing.
The write, the shoot, and then the 5 in post. Right. Yeah. No, editorial, it's so much can happen. So yeah.
And in that 3rd story, you get really angry at the people who made those first 2 stories about what they chose not to write, what they chose to write too much of, what they didn't get on film. And so like that, that 3rd story, those people are really angry at times, even if they're the same people at the 1st and 2nd story writers.
Yeah.
Do you have any, do you do any editing of the footage while you're shooting? Cutting scenes together?
We didn't on Boca. And that was for a variety of reasons. Time of day, resources, etc. I don't know if we're gonna. We might do some basic assemblies this time around. But
it's been one of the things as I saw like camera to cloud. It seemed like you could have an editor sitting somewhere in a nice air conditioned office, just getting all the footage while you're shooting it,
camera to cloud is,
and then just cutting it together and going, hey, by the way, if you gave me one close up of the hands, or if you gave me something else, I can use that as a.
That would be that is a phenomenal system, and I would love to take advantage of that. I think we've had to put our financial resources in other places. Honestly, there's a commitment there. We're right on the edge. Part of the reason we didn't do more assemblies on Boca was we realized we're an indie. We're shooting a lot of pages a day. We're just barely making our day.
That's what I thought camera to cloud could be interesting, because you're not doing like, you would be one of those things. Somebody's just sitting there throwing things in and thinking about it that's somewhere else, and you're not thinking about it. You just have a Teradek sitting on top, and you're just doing your thing.
It's a great approach, and we won't love the fact if we're not able to do it, but we also know the film this is. And I think where Jeff was going on that last point, which is it's not really that we could definitely have someone else work on that edit and put an assembly together for us. The challenge is like our film will run up against the schedule. So if someone was to tell us we need these 8 shots, then our AD is going to tell me you need to give up 2 scenes. And so
it's a
that'll be that. And so part of it is just making sure we're doing the honest handshake with ourselves. Like if we're able to even have the time and the energy to look at dailies, that will be a miracle this time, because we barely were able to do that more than a couple times during Boca. And so it is just this, like when you're doing 12, 14-hour days again. And so I tend to think it's that thing that I think Jeff and I want to fight for on every film, and we'll figure out how to get there. We're going to get a little closer on this one, but we're not going to get as close as we want to get on it.
There was on Boca, there was a lot of mid shoot, mid scene, I'm basically editing it in my head. Now that's not a reliable pattern at all. Because we're getting the main coverage, and then we're going to need A, B, and C. I know this as an editor, we're going to want this. But relying on somebody's brain is a terrible strategy. And that's why when we were heading into this, I was like, we are going to storyboard everything. We're going to sit down, because that is since we're not necessarily going to have those resources, how much can we get ahead of things?
Can you show us some of the storyboards?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we use storyboarder from Wonder Unit. Let me pull it up here. So this is one of our boards here. You can see along the bottom here the boards themselves of a certain sequence here in the film.
And you're able to pose those characters?
Yeah, that's kind of the fun part about this is that Storyboarder, they've got a lot of sketching elements, and if you have a Wacom tablet or something like that, you can do a lot of sketching. Andy and I, neither of us have great illustrating skills, so Storyboarder has a great set of models here. So this is the basic interface, which you can ix these stuff to draw on, but I won't bother with that. I'm going to click into here, which is the shot builder essentially. And it creates a little 3D environment here. And I'm just going to just toggle through some of the cameras that are in here. Most of these are not actual shots that we went with, but just cameras that have been put in here. And you can move the camera around. They're basic game controls, WASD on the keyboard to position, and then mouse around. You can come up and down. And so here's two of our main characters. They're both in this sort of walking pose right now. You click on one, and you can, as you noted, completely pose these characters. So you can just grab various. Sometimes it's hard to grab, but there he is. I can move his elbow too with this handle.
What we call inverse kinematics. So you're grabbing the end and pulling it. It's great.
So this is pretty fantastic. It has limitations in terms of its 3D posing, but what's great here is this is just an out-of-the-box model. I'll show the posing more in a moment here, but if you look over here, there's like a little inspector, and so from there's pre-built poses. I can change my adult male into an adult female,
right.
Kids, whatever.
So this is what you use for putting all the stuff together.
Yeah,
all the stuff together. Yeah,
it's Jeff was talking to a friend of ours, a writer friend, who was making a short, and Jeff suggested using Storyboarder, and I heard him talk about it. I'm someone who's at times allergic to Photoshop. It just stresses me out with that much of a menu system. So I'm technical, but I'm not that level technical. I opened Storyboarder. I created the first environment for this film, and then 3 weeks later, I had a first draft of the film done. And I say that just to say, it's easy to use. It was fun to use. And also, all of a sudden, I'm like, well, I don't just want a box as the object. I actually want, because I'm doing, it's a Japanese American, I want a hot pot. I want a specific oven. I went to CG Trader and Turbo Squid for the first time, downloaded, you mentioned models free or $2. That was kind of my entire life for getting for this film. Right. And then I had to put them in Blender. I've never downloaded Blender. Blender is a program that scares me when I see what other people do with it. Right. So I had to put them into Blender. I could sculpt them, I could save them, and then export them to here. I'm only saying that in that I'm someone who is not technical first. I'm story narrative first. And I was able to find tools that weren't too technically heavy and able to do this. And then Jeff, who's much more technical than I am, was able to just get much more out of this than I was able to get. And we have a half-hour animated version of our film that we share with all the departments, like Una, our DP. It matters to her because, again, she normally starts with just asking me questions from the script. And now she's kind of got this 30-minute story that was in my head, basically, for her to see. So any shot she's thinking about, or tone or pacing or everything else, she understands the film, production design, costumes, makeup. Not because we're showing all the costumes here, but when you put in some of those aspect ratios or a costume PDF deck of photos and you put it within an animated scene, it all of a sudden just clicks for someone else who sees it.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's, the thing is once you see it, there's so many things that you realize, oh, that's not going to work, or that blocking isn't going to work. And it isn't, there's so many things you figure out. And again, that's going to mean more setups every day. And it's going to be less, and making sure that you walk away with footage that you can use in the film.
Yeah. So I've just been posing him, obviously, as you can see. And the nice thing is, so I would kind of get into, also I should say, you can if you look at the bottom here, there's some basic,
so you can set the lenses.
Send the lenses, focal length, etc. So you can go in here.
And does it do depth of field?
It does not do depth of field, but it does do some basic lighting, which is pretty great. So over here on the left, you can see our elements in the scene, a little top-down view the whole environment, which is a pretty spare environment. We just want to get a sense of a backyard here.
Yep.
But you can go into the scene, and there's background color. This is a nighttime scene, but you can make it a daytime scene. Along with that, there's some basic elements. Ambient light is a big one of just like making it look dark versus daytime, and the colors react. Right. It's a fine grayscale. It's not fine. It's kind of rough, but it gives us a sense. Yeah, especially for vampire film, that's going to be a lot of night and dark shots. Right. So you can come around here, and what is great is, we're zooming in, kind of a bigger focal length here, longer focal length here. So that's camera one. Then we can go to camera two, and the reverse, set up all these things all in one environment, and then export out the individual shots.
And in some ways, I will say, the rougher the better, because what can happen in pre-production or storytelling or anything is you overthink it too much. You're trying to get to perfection. This is not a place to get to perfection. This is a place to get rough, so you can have better conversations. Yeah. And if it did three more things, and again, Alex, you'd be a perfect example of someone who's like, you would use it in the way that would get three more things out of it, or wanted to do the three more things. And for me, it's I needed to do just enough to convey things, but if it does too much more than that, then I'm spending 2 more weeks just trying to fill this thing out.
When people start talking about the color of the shirt and that's not what this is for.
No, we definitely want to stay broad. We would put colors on the characters that we're talking about. Obviously, the extras in the background here don't matter. And I kind of wanted to play with some lighting in this scene. So you can see again in the inspector on the right, there are various lights. Right. I was just trying to create this like club environment. You can just turn them off. Again, it's not high detail, but it gives you some stuff to play with. Yeah. You can also go into the top down here, and like this room, like these are walls. we literally just had to put a wall and then the lights along the wall, and then you can take a camera and move it around. You can see it's in the upper left, the preview of what's happening with that camera.
That's great.
As we drag it along, and then we can go back to here to focus all.
Can you animate the cameras?
That the short answer is no, you can't. That was one of the
storyboarder. It's not a pre-vis.
What was interesting is we went through, and we've got like something like 800 or we've got 900 different shots. Yeah. We'll never shoot 900 shots, but towards the end, I was like, oh, you know what? We've boarded however many it was, and none of them are moving camera shots. Like there's no, we had like 2 or 3 dolly shots, but like that was one of the interesting things about working with the software, was realizing it's got no tool set for dollies or cranes or any kind of motion. So what kind of some of our creative mind only expanded to within what the tools had.
Right.
It wasn't until later that we're like, oh, you know what? There's more that we want to do with a dolly here or a push in there.
Right. No, absolutely. We got a ton of questions stacking up, so let's jump into
Let's get into it.
Next one comes from Aaron G. and Carla in Flagstaff, Arizona. Are you targeting certain markets? For example, Netflix, Prime, theaters. Has that affected your pre-production in any way?
Yeah, I have a business side to me. I can't help but think about where this thing lands or anything else. You sort of target all. Again, it's a niche film. It's a horror genre drama, so you understand like where do those things play better. When we're done production, when we're into post, you potentially start figuring out what festivals you're going to submit to, what festivals do you think you have the best chance at. You're looking for a sales agent. What helped us with Boca is we didn't get into Sundance, we didn't get into South by, but we were able to get a sales agent. That sales agent was able to put that film out in front of Netflix, Amazon. Like we were at screenings in New York and LA where they had 30 buyers look at the film. Some of those buyers, and we were warned about this, and it was very entertaining for us from an ego standpoint. They're like, some buyers are going to walk out of your film 5 minutes into it. Don't be offended. They just know they're not going to buy it and they don't want it. And it's like, there's a level of clarity in yeses and nos.
And they made it 25 minutes. It was definitely 25 minutes before they walked out.
As long as they weren't shaking their head or laughing, we were okay about it. But yeah, so it's a very surreal experience selling a film. We do think about these things, but to a degree, until you have the film in the can, until you have an edit, and it doesn't have to be the perfectly polished edit, but it has to be really far along in terms of all the assets of it. You're not really putting something in front of a distributor or anyone else, especially at a small indie level. At a bigger level, you're pre-selling in the film. At a bigger level, you may have a distributor before you even start. But us right now, we have to prove we have the film we want to make. We're fortunate that it's our second film, so it's so there's certain doors that, not a lot, but some doors we might be able to open to at least have people look at the film because we've sold a film before and because we had a film launched across the country before.
Very, very broadly, there's, it's an indie drama. And so it plays at those stakes, and it's the horror genre. It can be other things, but those are the two things that it is. Those are the two main targets that will be how the film is sold.
Right. So there's a niche channel, a horror channel, Shudder, which is owned by AMC and Sundance. If Shudder doesn't want to look at this film or isn't interested, that's going to send up some interesting signals to us, right?
Right.
Different than if Netflix doesn't want it. So, I mean, you're not trying to launch a film to everyone. You're trying to specifically to the question, find your most niche audiences that you can and build from there.
Yeah. Next question.
Jeffrey Powers, Madison, Wisconsin, says, I was just an actor for a local movie, which was a lot of fun. It was my first one. For you, how hard is it to get roles filled, and do you use Backstage?
So our casting director, so this is our second feature. We had casting directors on both, and especially for Boca, but this as well. Our casting director was almost the most important person to hire because they have access to actors that we don't, because we have access to almost no actors. We have friends who act, but that is a different thing. So having casting directors who can reach out to the agents, who can reach out to the agencies, who can get stars to audition, who can at various levels. Again, we're making small indies. We know what these films are. So there's certain people that would just say, no, thank you, it's too small. It definitely is an interesting time for indies because there's so many streaming shows out there right now, and the money is so big. I mean, you look at Severance on Apple TV, and even though it's barely in one building, that show's just saying, we've got all the money we need. Thank you. And so for an agent to even want to show a potential actor a film at $500,000, that's a genre like vampire with agoraphobia, that's not the easiest sell, and we know it. I mean, we're fortunate. We are thrilled with who's going to play our lead, Aiko. We've locked in our top three actors for our top three leads. We've got about 15 more smaller roles we'll be casting over the next 2 weeks. Some people will be the first three leads we were willing to cast anywhere out of the country. The next 5 leads, it'll be New York or Massachusetts, and then those last 10 leads of kind of 5 lines or under will be more Massachusetts in terms of it. But not all indies get to have casting directors, and casting becomes for us, again, we're not saying that all of a sudden we've got actors that are going to be able to get this film sold. That there's no guarantee in that, but we have actors who are doing this and are in many other things and definitely help us as both in terms of the type of film we want to make with them, most importantly, but also films that sales agents, festivals, and others might be interested in.
Yeah. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. What camera or cameras and a nonlinear editor are you using?
Yeah, that was part of the discussion. And we talked briefly about camera options, but our DP, she's shot a lot on the Alexa, and that's what she wanted to use. And we looked at the nuts and bolts of that, and it made a lot of sense. So we're going to be shooting on the Alexa Mini, and I am creating a structure wherein we'll be cutting in Final Cut 10, so that we can use that as the anchor point of our post-production.
And are you coloring in 10 as well?
I would expect that we won't be coloring in 10, just because we'll hand it off to a colorist, and I think feature colorists are not often using 10.
Right. So they're going to go to Resolve most likely.
Yeah. So and I'm pretty comfortable with the conform from Final Cut 10 to Resolve. And even if they use something that's not Resolve, I'm comfortable getting it out. So, yeah.
The next question.
Roscoe Jones in Brea, California. During COVID quarantines, many people have developed a fear of people and places. Has this altered your story in any way, and might it help with your marketing?
Roscoe Jones, you got the name of an actor. Great name.
It was the basis of the story.
It
affected it. It is the story.
It's why the story exists.
Yeah,
absolutely. To be able to have someone who doesn't want to leave her home, and also happens to be a vampire. It was our emotional state during the early days of COVID. So absolutely, that is the basis of the story.
The fact that she's a vampire is the metaphor in play for what we've all experienced for the last 2 years. That's what was so great about the script that Andy wrote, is that it's a character study dressed up as a vampire movie.
Right. I tend to like lo-fi sci-fi. Boca was that. It was an apocalypse without an apocalypse. This is a vampire story about someone struggling, trying not to be a vampire at times. And so I love Twilight Zone stories. Jeff and I both kind of relate to lo-fi sci-fi. Never Let Me Go. These type of amazing, just small stories that aren't so VFX reliant and just really on narrative character studies. Kind of the weird things we like.
Next question.
Sky Gleason in Seattle back with distribution. Where or who do you see distributing this film?
Again, we have broad ideas because we've sold a film before, and so Screen Media released our last film that we did, so we know the type of ones out there. So we write down lists. I mean, it'll probably end up at some combo if we're lucky. Knock on wood. Films oftentimes don't really get releases and don't necessarily get theatrical anymore. We were fortunate enough that Boca opened in 13 cities across the country and day and date on video on demand, and then 3 months later on Netflix. So, I mean, there was a planned attack on that, and that worked out fine. We think that I can't say whether this will be theatrical at all, because theaters are less and less about indies these days. Not just the theater's fault, but we will look for whether we're going directly to a stream, whether we have the fortune to get to talk directly to a streamer, or whether we're going through a distributor. Those will be the conversations we're hoping to open. And again, hopefully we'll get into a festival that makes those conversations even easier and us more attractive as a package to a distributor.
But we're not relying on a festival path, right? I mean, we didn't with Boca, and we're not going to on this one. I mean, yeah, we're going to submit to festivals. Right. Everyone wants to, everyone should. But as with all things, that's if that's your only strategy, you're going to be hard up. So
Jeff and I very much live in a world of we create our own luck. That doesn't mean things will always go our way, but we got a sales agent, so we hunted down the sales agent more than we hunted down the festivals. And that's actually what opened all our doors on the film and made it so we could even make a second film. And we'll do the same here.
The next question.
From Courtney in Hollywood, since your main character is an agoraphobic vampire, do you have to avoid any daylight balance light sources like compute screens, iPhones, and so forth?
You want to explain that, Courtney?
Touche.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and the vampire rules, they can't be out in daylight. So what if she orders, a bulb burns out in her house and she orders some replacement from Amazon, it comes, she doesn't look at the package, and it's a 5600 balanced light bulb and she catches on fire.
I gotta say, full respect to you, and for you've out-nerded the nerdiest of us. That was phenomenal. Well done. That was a crossover tech, sci-fi, vampire, you hit all the points there. That was beautiful.
You just wrote a short. That's all I'm saying. Like, there's a short that we're gonna do where someone just orders it, and it only works for geeks because you just see the 56K go by on the thing, and you see them turn it on, and they turn it on, and then they just go poof, and that's the end. And the last shot is just looking at the case that says 56K on it.
Daylight balance.
Daylight balance. Yeah.
The closest idea I got to that, because you got Alex there. It's like the closest idea I got to it was thinking if she had an iPhone, and I'm not having her do this, where it's like she doesn't have a reflection, so she can't open it with Face ID, and she doesn't have biometrics because she's a dead body, basically. So she just couldn't even turn on a phone. And the level of like wanting something new, wanting to connect with people, and even she can't do that, right? She can't do a Zoom call. She can be in the audio of it, but she can't be in the video of it. And so
that was that's such a great scene, and I wanted that scene. It was just one of those things where like it's. To communicate, to make it clear, to make the joke land we're gonna have to work so hard. It's gonna take, and it's like, if it plays, it's gonna be great. If it doesn't play, then we will have lost people and confused them. And I'm just like, but
I can already see the TikTok. That's all I'm saying. I can see the TikTok. All right, next question.
Courtney's right back again from Hollywood. Since your primary set is a single house, did you choose to shoot in a real location or build a set in a stage or warehouse?
Yeah, good question. We chose a real house. We did some location scouting, and we found a house in Eastern Massachusetts, which is just gorgeous. It's great. The owners are friendly, nice folks. There would certainly be an advantage to building a set, but I think we wanted somewhere that felt fully real, and didn't feel like we've got stage lighting, that we're lighting in a practical sense.
Also, I just don't think our budget would even allow it, right? Like I don't.
We would have had to spend so much,
right? Where
building the set.
There's enough rooms within the house alone, the main house, that we couldn't pull it off.
Next question.
Eric Price in Kansas City. As one of Bokeh's happy backers, I'm curious about the impact that uncertainties related to crowdsourcing had on decisions in post, and how you account for this in your pre-production work.
Uncertainties. Get comfortable with uncertainty. That's
Yeah, I mean, I think I tend to think, again, it's Jeff and I, what's fun about this film right now is we're trying to bring the perspective of Bokeh, basically the mistakes we made and the wins we had there, and try to just be calmer in general, right? Like, it's know when something's an emergency, know when something's not, right? And not try to react to things as emergencies. So things that aren't expected, we expect those every single second. I expect someone who is crew that loves this film or something will drop out tomorrow, not because they're a mean person or a bad person, because something happens, and then we just have to respond. Film is about just so much of film is about responding to the moment and not getting lost in the moment, or not wondering like trying not to take things personally, but just trying to take things professionally. Like, I love creative tension. I don't like personal tension. So again, that's a little bit more of a ramble towards the question there.
But it's also plan for the best, but no, sorry. How's that? The phrase I'm talking about. I totally blank on it right now. But so specifically about the Kickstarter that we did for Post on Bokeh, we had a budget for Post on Bokeh, and if that Kickstarter flopped, we would have survived. But the Kickstarter being successful allowed us to do more things and expand into really great areas. We were very fortunate in that we were able to put together a situation where we did our final sound mix at Skywalker Ranch, which is maybe the best place to be.
It's a nice place. It's okay to hang out, at Skywalker.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I wish we could have just hung out there for the entire mix. But if
did you get to stay in the little houses?
We didn't stay in the little house. I mean, I lived 20 minutes from.
Oh, that's right.
From there. So as much as I would love, maybe next time we'll get to stay in the cabins.
I suggest the Kurosawa room.
Okay. Good to know. If I can make requests.
It is the best poster collection you're ever going to see.
Oh my gosh.
It's incredible. Until he opens his museum.
Yeah. Anyway, so, I mean, we would have had a sound mix. We got to have a really superb sound mix, not just because it was done at Skywalker Sound, but just knowing where we were before Skywalker and knowing the mix afterwards, like, that is fantastic. And that's something that, especially for the Kickstarter backers, like, we can't have more gratitude. We'll never be able to express it enough.
And one of the things that makes a big difference, right, is that they're mixing into a stage. So you're actually at the theater volume. It's one of the things that I've really learned a lot about, is that you really, to mix for the theater, you have to have a theater to do it in.
It definitely helps as we think about sound on this film, just some of the lessons we learned. I'll say one more thing about Kickstarter, because I think the question was leaning a little bit towards there as well, or any crowdfunding, which is, our ask was very simple. We made a film, help us make it better. Here are the ways that we'll make it better. Our YouTube video, our Facebook video, we only posted the video once on Facebook. It was shared 2,000 times. And that doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're doing crowdfunding, that actually was a lot, because we asked 3 simple things. Watch the video, consider sharing the video, possibly back us. Like, we didn't ask for money first. We never did. We said, watch a 2-minute, 3-minute video, basically,
of us in Iceland.
Right. Then consider share the video. That actually matters more than money at this moment. Then consider backing us.
And the level of improvement, like I said, so our sound mixer was David Sandwich. He did a great sound mix in his own studio. And even so, that's not like the theaters at Skywalker. So being able to take that step up was hugely meaningful.
That's awesome. Next question.
Speaking of sound, Mickey Macacor, our friend from the Philippines, says, what pre-production work are you doing with regard to sound? What kind of involvement has your production sound mixer and your supervising sound editor had at this stage?
Not a lot of involvement right now. I'm working with the sound guys that are coming on to manage the audio pipeline, for production and having it ready for post.
And I'll also just say this to be clear: it's like at times some of the questions are asking us about 2 or 3 levels deep of supervisor. This person, a person under this person. It's like $500,000 indie film. Levels disappear very quickly. It's one person. Now, again, you're trying to get the right person.
Department heads are the department.
Right. Department heads are departments. And so it's some of that, not that that's a luxury, but it's not a luxury we can afford. So we just try to get the best person we can. We definitely like to talk to people in post ahead of time to help us inform how we'll get clean plates, what type of sound we want to capture on certain type of effects and things.
And a lot of the post positions, we talked before about tax credits of where we shoot. Post-production has their own separate category of tax credits. And so we haven't locked in all of the post facilities, post personnel at this point. So some of those conversations can happen.
Mm-hmm. Next question.
Sky Gleason in Seattle, Washington, right back again. This time he says, who is your audience? Are you making this film for your audience or for yourself because you need to get this story out?
I make the story I want to watch, right? That is an important thing. You write this. I can't help but think about audiences. I was raised in marketing and business, so I can't help but think about audiences. But I have to give a damn about the story, or why should anyone else, right? So it's got to matter to me emotionally to connect with Boca. The same thing for both of us, which is the actors. It mattered more to them because it mattered to us. That being said, I think when you think about art and you don't think about your audience at all, some people are just geniuses, and that's fine.
Yeah.
Most of us actually have to try to work to make these things work. And so I think a lot of people remove audience conversations from it, and that is at their own peril.
I think that, Andy's written a great story, and it's definitely a personal story for him, but something that is very relatable. And it's a story that he needs to tell. It's a story that I wanted to produce because I want to help him tell it. And the question of audience is part of it because, Boca came out 5 years ago, and we've both written a lot of scripts in 5 years that were stories that we wanted to tell. And this is the one that felt like, oh, and there's an audience for that. This is, and maybe the other scripts will come back around someday, but this is the one that was like, okay, this has a place in the world. This is relevant to where we are, and it's our job to find that audience, but it exists.
Yeah. Next question.
Roscoe Jones out of Bray, California. Film schools like to talk about the above the line and below the line people and costs. Do you think in these terms when budgeting?
You think but we actually don't really live in it that much. Partly because we're not paying ourselves a lot right now to make the film, because the ability to make the film is kind of the win, though we still need to take care of ourselves and everything else. So you think about in terms of cast, a lot of times in trying to get certain actors or things, you don't have enough for below the line. You can sacrifice that a lot. That's not where we live. We live in that we need the right crew. We need the right funding for below the line. So, there are different metric breakdowns, 2/3, 1/3, 20%, 80%. So, different groups have different philosophies on it. We're here to fund the film that can get the best version. Best film wins for us. That's the way we think about it. So we actually don't really live in terms of above the line, below the line. I know a lot of people do. We live on who's the best person to play ACO, who's our best DP we can get at this level, who's our best production designer, and just we treat it that way. We treat it much more individual than just like category versus category.
Next question.
Kyle Hammond in Chicago up next with, do you build social media marketing into your shooting process?
We are building it now.
Right here.
We had sorry?
Yeah.
Right here.
Yeah.
This is it.
Right.
Hello, social marketing. We had some of that on Boca, and it was small and scrappy and stuff. But No, we're looking at that right now. I think that's critical for an indie on the lower end that we are, is to establish that you have some people who are interested in your film, and that starts in pre-production. So over the course of the last month, we have gone through and started putting our social media accounts together. By the way, you can find us at idon'twantblood.com. Here we are. We're just getting started on the social media aspect, just starting to post, but our intention is to have give a window into anyone who wants to follow along on this process. Some of that will go through the film accounts. I also personally am going to be doing some kind of behind the scenes perspective that isn't really appropriate for the film accounts. But if you follow me at Geoffrey O, GeoffreyO, I will be posting some of my experience along the way.
But yeah, I mean, you are responsible for your audience. You don't get to point to someone else and say it's them. It's right. You don't. I don't feel like I get to be artist enough where I'm like, nope, that's not about us. That's not about. No, it's you're responsible for your audience, and it's going to be. It may be small to begin with, and that's fine, and it'll grow a little bit over time, and you'll find the people who love what you're doing, and you'll find the people who hate what you're doing, and it's like it's good to have filters. It's good to know who loves something and who hates something.
Yeah. Next question.
Jeffrey Powers, Madison, Wisconsin. Office Hours has a band. Do you need any music for your movie?
That's a good question.
Some folks in the band are pretty good. They're pretty good.
Right. We've started discussing composers, but haven't settled on anything. And who knows? There's a lot to come.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Sam Greenwood in Toronto, Canada says, where did you get all the assets you used in the 8N storyboarder?
So basic models such as like chair, table, block,
they have
car.
A small library.
They've got a small library of probably about 30. We use a door a lot, thank goodness. And then after that, the first place I went to was CG Trader. I always looked for a free model for cup, plate, carrots. I could get a lot of that stuff. If I'm getting more specific, say a Japanese hot pot or a singing bowl or an incense bowl, something like that, then I would try to have a rule of, can I find these things for under $5? There were about 5 or 6 props I was willing to maybe spend $10 to $20 on, which is still a fairly cheap model if it was a kind of key prop for us that we'd be seeing in a bunch of scenes and I really needed production design to get what I'm going for here. I would say at least 80% of the models we have in here are free models I got from CG Trader. I know a lot of people use Turbo Squid. I felt like CG Trader was easier for me to find free models for what I was looking for.
And you can see I pulled up just the small library of basic assets it has, as a leaping off point.
Right. Absolutely. And next question.
Stan Chan in Roseville, California. Have you looked into crypto crowdfunding methods to reach larger funding goals?
Absolutely not. It's sometimes it is so good to know when you have a no versus like, yeah, we're thinking about it. It's like, honestly, again, not that we're against NFTs or crypto or everything else. It's that we don't know enough about it. Like, I'm curious about it. I've thought about it a little bit. It's not where our headspace is right now or what we're trying to do. Right. So there are viable models there, and we really feel like we've got the energy to go after the things we know, and we don't have the energy to go after the things we don't know. And
I've found in my life that know your limits is a good thing, and cryptocurrency is outside of my grasp right now.
Right.
Maybe someday.
Yeah.
Next question.
Kyle Hammond in Chicago, Illinois says, you mentioned integrating Pitch Deck with your 30-minute version of your movie from Storyboarder. Is that done in Storyboarder, or did you build that in Keynote?
Pitch Deck?
Oh, just when we talk about pitching. So I don't actually put it in Keynote. So we put it in, so I have a pitch deck. I keep it as a separate thing because not everyone wants to watch a 30-minute movie, right? So we'll share it to department heads and things. It's just a QuickTime file. It's an export basically that Jeff.
Oh, you're talking
together.
about
the movie itself.
Yeah. Sorry. So this I misunderstood the question. Yeah, the storyboards are 900 storyboards. Yes, we built a whole film out of that's like 35 minutes, and it's actually I have that as well. I won't spend a lot of time on it, but let's see. This is the Final Cut project of the storyboards, which you know what? I'm going to turn the music roll off because there's some copyrighted music in there, and I don't want to shut the stream down. But you can see here that these are our storyboards. I put in a lot of sound effects for certain points. All the gray, which used to be green, are various musical choices. So this was also part of it, sort of beyond just the shots themselves. The sort of sense of pacing and environments and tone, a lot of which kind of came through in the music.
I just realized what that scene was.
Oh yeah, no, it's there's weird stuff in it. So yeah, we have it's a half-hour film basically that we share. We just share with the people who we think could benefit from it.
I tweeted out last night, like whatever, 8 seconds of it. You know, it's just sort of like, hey, here's the storyboard film. So that's already in our social marketing.
Next question.
Sky Gleason in Seattle back again. SAG, AFTRA, DGA, and so forth. As an independent film, do you have to work with these groups?
Absolutely. I mean, definitely at the level we're casting. SAG, we work with SAG. We work with SAG on their COVID requirements as well. I mean, filmmaking is very different now, to no one's surprise, than it would have been 2.5 years ago. So, I mean, there's cost and productions you bring in to make sure we have a safe set in terms of it and all those things we have to do. But yeah, I mean, I was working on SAG paperwork with our UPM yesterday, all day and night. And so there's a lot to make it work. And it's for the protection of everyone. And so, yeah, I mean, it's SAG is very much a part of this film.
Next question.
Harringen Collins in Flagstaff, Arizona says, what have you found as the most rewarding aspect of pre-production? And explain it if you can.
It's the thing I say to everyone who we're fortunate enough to work with. I do this because I like to collaborate, not because I like to work independently. Like I'm not an auteur model from a directing and producing standpoint. I get energy by working with creative people, and I try to always work with people who are smarter than me, which isn't necessarily the hardest thing to do, but it's what I aim for. And so for me, it is, one, it's getting to work with Jeff every day on this, and then it's getting to work with a whole group of people, many of whom I didn't know 4 weeks ago, and are absolutely just kind of, it's incredible working with great people.
I mentioned earlier, the summer camp vibe, and it's like you're 8 years old, 10 years old, and you're going to get to go to summer camp again, and you're going to be there with your friends. And then you do some planning, like the storyboards, and you start seeing what kind of fun you're going to have at camp. That's the energy.
One of my favorite things right now is when someone says, "Don't worry, I've got this." I'm not even sure you could say a better sentence to me right now in terms of just like being able to trust people and just knowing that they're on top of what they're on top of.
Next question.
Courtney Gooden in Hollywood back with, since you're shooting in a practical house, and I assume it all takes place at night, will you be tenting the house to keep regular days for the cast and crew?
It'll be a split. Yep. There's going to be a lot of tenting, and there's going to be some overnights.
Next question.
Next one comes from Roscoe Jones in Brea, California. It seems that your main characters are going to carry the story. What have you planned for their dressing rooms or a place where they can go to relax between scenes?
A practical house helps. That has 4 different bedrooms. So there's and again, these are both what's appropriate and also what would have been a SAG rule, is that our main actor, she will have her own private bedroom within the house itself, just to rest and relax, because a lot of filmmaking is a waiting game, even unfortunately in a small indie. And then as other people are coming in, there's another room reserved for the various cast members who come at different times there.
And that's something that we went into on the location scout, which maybe if we're lucky, we'll be back to talk about another time. But looking at those kind of elements when we're doing the scout.
Do you use any? Do you have a stand-in for the main actor, like for lighting and so on and so forth?
I'm sure there will be PAs, and like every now and then we'll have someone, but it isn't like a pure stand-in in terms of height, skin tones, and everything else, right?
There's a couple of movies I worked on where one of the PAs looked a lot like the main actress. Like, and it was really useful. Like she might have gotten the job because she had film history. She has a PA history, but we were like, well, that'll be really useful.
There's definitely a lot of double duty for the crew. It's like you're this, but you're also this.
When I went to NYU Film School, one of the people I knew was the very first year of Real World New York on MTV. And one of the people I knew who was in my class was actually one of the stand-ins for one of the characters there. And that was my first understanding of, oh, this isn't reality. So yeah, it's they had stand-ins on a reality show. We don't for an indie film.
We had one shot where the two people, this guy went to this woman's house and handed her a box. And the two halves of that were shot like 6 weeks apart with stand-ins for each one of them. Like it was completely. Anyway, next question.
Mickey Macacor is back again from the Philippines. He says, what's your preference between SFX and VFX, and what will be done with this film?
Yeah, we've already done a whole pass of the script for VFX. And our preference and our intention is to do as much practical as possible. There are a few visual effects shots that will absolutely need to be done, digitally. And we're kind of setting up ourselves, hopefully, for as much success there as possible.
Yeah. Last question.
The last one comes from Jeremy White in Virginia here in the U.S., and he says, non-film school student question. What's the line that you were just talking about?
Above and below the line, I think is the question.
Above and below the line, yeah.
Yeah, there are certain roles in above and below. So above the line is basically it's director, writer, producers, actors. Those are considered above the line talents. I don't love to use the word talent for that description because we're hiring everyone who's on this film is talented and kind with their time and working on this. And then there's below the line, which are all the departments, all the crew, post-production, legal, marketing, everything else goes below that line.
The line is literally a line in the budget. And basically above the line is you're coming out to do this project for a set fee. Below the line is more typically you have a day rate and you'll be here for 24 days and you're calculated on that regard with overtime on long days, et cetera.
Something I just want to say, since I know we're finishing up here, is from our point of view, like I said, we like doing this because we like to collaborate, but it's not just collaborate within the people in the film. Something like this is great because the more information you can get out there about how someone has a process, like a lot of the stuff I try to figure out both on Boca and this is because I'm watching other people of what they figured out through things like this, right? So, I mean, as much transparency as we're able to give, as much as we could help someone else out who's thinking about doing their own project like this or anything else. Well, and that's great. We love doing it.
That's why, I wanted to come on. I mean, obviously I've been on office hours and I've been watching it all along the way, even if I haven't been on camera. And Alex and I's long history, but this is such a great show for everyone knows that. I don't need to talk about that, but it's such a great show. And it's something that we wanted to be a part of with our project. So thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for a fantastic hour. And hopefully we'll get you on a little bit more before, during, after, try to pull you in.
Yeah. We're in for an adventure here.
Right. You may see us at our most positive now. Maybe that'll continue 3 months from now. Maybe we'll just look like broken humans. So we'll see where we end up.
We'll try to stay as far away from Project Greenlight as we can. All right. Thank you guys so much for your time.
Good one. Nice to meet all of you.
Thanks.
Yeah, good to see you. And thanks to our producers for the great questions. Just really, really great questions, both in the first hour and second hour. Thank you to the panelists. We can't do this without you. And now we're going to go into After Hours and continue talking about production. All right, here we go.